Hi, my name is Brandon Bradley, and this is my Time Attack style 3D platformer level. I was given roughly a week and a half to create a level that was both compelling and engaging for the player, while also implementing all the core concepts of level design. Compared to my previous levels, I decided to start the design process with choosing the core mechanics of the level, as my overall goal was to create a platformer more akin to Crash Bandicoot, Mario, or the 3D sections of Sonic games. In those series, the level mechanics are on the forefront, as a simplistic core gameplay loop of jumping and or jumping to attack never changes. This level takes place in a cavern-like area, where the only way to escape is to make it to the top of the huge tower in the center of the map. However, the player must move quick as the level is being flooded by water from below. It is up to the player to make use of the level's mechanics to travel through the platforming obstacles before they are consumed by the water. While the end goal is to make it to the top of the tower, the player will come across enemies and collectibles throughout their journey. Enemies are scattered around the level in order to push against player progression. They have more frequent appearances the closer the player gets to the top of the tower. The player must factor in these obstacles when choosing the route that will best get them to the end before the water fully rises. Collectible items will also appear alongside certain routes of the level. Usually, these items appear on a route with more difficult platforming or with more enemies. Players who choose to take these more difficult routes will be rewarded with items that will either speed up player movement, or slow down or stop the flooding of the water. Upon starting the level, the large tower peeks from the rocks and a bright star can be seen from the top of the tower. This catches the player's interest and foreshadows the player's final destination. Additionally, throughout the level, the player will always be able to see multiple platforms ahead, so that the player is never confused and always know where to go next. Implicit paths won't be what's directly in front of the player. They usually contain the red falling platforms, more enemies, or a collectible. Players who take on challenges aside from getting to the end are rewarded. Explicit paths are the safest for the player's progression. Explicit paths will encounter few to no enemies compared to implicit paths, which will have more enemies or jumps that result in falling if failed. All forms of emerging gameplay are through the use of climbing, double jump, and the rope swing mechanic. Enemies in certain falling platforms are always shown in a bright red color, signaling a threat. Falling platforms that aren't red will either be yellow or orange. These only fall once you leave them, with the yellow spawning an orange platform after a few seconds and the orange permanently removing the platform after a few seconds. Red platforms fall immediately after jumping on them, so the player should move off them quickly. Climbing areas are in a much darker color compared to the material used for the platforming sections. This should signal that these parts of the levels can be climbed. Shape language is used across the environment. The environment features quite a few sharp rocks. This reinforces that the area is dangerous and falling into it will result in failure. My initial iteration of the level featured very flat platforming, lacked side objectives to keep the player engaged, and did not give the player enough reason to play through the level. This created a platformer that sort of understood a few technical level design aspects, but featured an overwhelmingly boring experience. Due to feedback from my professor, I went back to the basics of platforming and analyzed what made the arcade classic Donkey Kong such a standout level. To my surprise, the design concepts of the game translated perfectly, as the game had most of the push and pull factors that my level lacked. Enemies that pushed the players from the start, items that benefited players trying to get them, and bonus points for side objectives, obstacles that went against player progression, and paths that made player choice matter. As a result of my research, I implemented more rewards for harder, more varied routes, and the flood mechanic to make the level feel more intense. The collectibles exist to make the player feel like they have a chance against the progressing water. Instead of being a lifeless platforming marathon, the level turned into a race to escape the incoming threat below the player's feet. And with that brings my level overview to a close. Figuring out concepts and ways to use the mechanics while also keeping in mind heavy time constraints and limited scale was a tough thing to balance. But I hope you're able to see the potential in this level, just as I have. I feel like I've set up the foundations for a level that can easily be expanded upon further iterations. Overall, I enjoyed this project, and since I never had to deal with this sort of time restriction, I believe it was a good learning experience. So, thank you for watching.